listening to episode 331 of Might of Life Radio. I'm Matt Blackburn, and I'm excited to finally make this show that I've been wanting to do for at least 4 years on electric vehicles, specifically as they relate to human health and the effects of electromagnetic fields coming from different sources. RF, called radio frequency, which is a type of E.M.F. You also have your electric field, and you also have your magnetic field. And all of these reels and videos that big influencers make about E.M.F. don't really get into the details. They usually just blanket the whole topic in the umbrella term E.M.F., which doesn't really mean much. And they might reference one study showing the negative effects of RF on human health, but there's never any solution other than avoidance. Don't drive a Tesla, don't drive an EV, never wear Apple AirPods, even for a 10-minute walk or 20-minute walk or a short phone call, which is all ridiculous to me. Health is about resilience and about adapting to a changing world. We're rapidly going into a world of AGI and what's called the singularity and artificial intelligence. And all of this is very scary to a lot of people because it challenges tradition, it challenges decades, centuries of how humans have lived. And a lot of people just go the Amish route and they're trying to find cars that were built in the 1960s or the 1970s and going really extreme with it, which I don't think is healthy. That's just swinging on the pendulum the opposite way. In my opinion, we can interface with these things in a healthy way. It doesn't mean you have to get the Neuralink brain chip if you don't want it. Maybe outside our body augmentation. I'm a huge fan of exoskeleton suits. If you've seen the movie Elysium, I love sci-fi films, raised on Star Wars. I watch maybe one sci-fi film a year, and I think there's a lot to learn in those of how these things could improve our quality of life. You know, aside from the dystopian part of all of these movies like Blade Runner and Minority Report. And the same thing with humanoid robots. We have iRobot, obviously Terminator. There is that recent movie Ex Machina, and they all paint the humanoid robots in a negative light. And I bring all of this up to make the point that I think the same thing is happening with electric vehicles. Obviously, it's become very political over the years. For some reason, people identify with their mode of transport, like it defines who they are, which says a lot about the person and their warped worldview. My first electric vehicle was a Nissan Leaf that I leased in 2011. And that was way back when the range of an EV was only about 50 miles. So I really had to plan my trips, and I got stranded a few times. They've come quite a ways since then. And the reason why I got back into them was living 100% off grid. Around 2021, I moved to 100% off grid property and slowly upgraded the system that came with the cabin. The amount of hours that I spent talking to electricians and people that worked on that system is just ridiculous. So I consider myself an expert in that field, knowing more than especially the people that make posts demonizing electric vehicles when they've never lived off grid and have no idea what goes into it. I don't think it's healthy to live in a doomsday mindset that the second coming is about to arrive, that the apocalypse and the four horsemen are coming, that World War III or World War IV are inevitable, or that some major cataclysm's going to happen. Of course, there's always a chance that things could get wild really quickly, but people have been crying wolf for a very long time. There was Y2K. Obviously, there's solar flares. There's a popular channel called Space Weather News that I follow. They talk about the coming pole shift that happens in the blink of an eye versus the myth that it takes forever to happen. It's going to be an overnight kind of catastrophe of tons of earth changes. And I like being aware of all of these things, but not stressing about it, not having it on my mind all the time. I just do my best to prepare, have 25 fruit trees. I have a geodesic growing dome that I can grow avocados and citrus year round here in North Idaho. I have a gravity spring. So if we went back to the Stone Ages, I could still flip on my faucet and have running water without using 4,000 or 5,000 watts for well pumps. Like I learned about at my last property, a ridiculous amount of electricity just to pump water from the earth. So very grateful to have that gravity spring water feeding my house. So food, water, and then power is the big one. And if you think about EMP, a solar flare, yes, it could all get wiped out even if you're off grid, but there are things called EMP shields. There's actually a company called EMP Shield. You can put them on your cars, which I've done. You could put them on your Ethernet ports. I have them on my security cameras. I have them on my Starlink. I have them on every point on my off-grid system, meaning on my batteries, on my solar panels, on the breaker box, on the charge controllers, and that's what's called redundancy. Because when it comes to EMP shields, the more the better. And that's not just for electromagnetic pulses, it also protects from lightning strikes and solar flares, which happen all the time. Since I've lived 100% off grid, I've played the thought experiment thousands of times. What if I can no longer procure propane gas to run my generator, gasoline, or diesel? Those three fuels, because you can be 100% off grid and you're very reliant on the grid if you are reliant on those three things. So I haven't had time to build a steam engine yet to run my generator, but that is a long-term goal of mine. Of course, people have done hydrogen and different methods of powering their generator to charge their batteries. But the easy entry for me, the logical entry, was gasoline and diesel. Besides running machines, like I have a mini excavator, a full-size excavator, a skid steer, those things have not evolved to be electric yet. I know there's an electric tractor out there I've looked at, but I don't know if the tech is there yet to support the energy requirements for doing serious dirt work like I've done on my properties. But when it comes to transportation, going to town for supplies, which everybody needs to do, that takes gas, diesel, or an EV, electric vehicle. When my batteries get to 100% that are charged from my 40 solar panels, my return on investment stops for that day, meaning the $100,000 plus that I put into building out the system with Eclipse 200 amp hour huge batteries, have 80 kilowatt hours of storage. I have the Victron system. I have two 10 kilowatt Victron inverters that actually have toroidal style transformers in it, which is huge for clean energy and reducing EMFs. My solar panels are off the roof. I get asked that question all the time about EMF exposure from solar panels. Ideally, especially if you live in the country, most people that I've seen have them on what's called a pole mount system. So they're on poles away from the house. You trench underground to run the wire, and it's well away from the house. So when they're producing electrons from photons, you don't have to deal with the electric and magnetic fields that are created. Although there is what's called the inverse square law, so the distance decreases the strength of the field, which most people forget about. So I really don't think having them on the roof is that big of a deal anyway. And they're only making those fields when the sun is out. So when you're sleeping, obviously the sun's not out, they're not going to be capturing light and they're not going to be producing those fields. So not every system is going to cost 100K to make. I definitely have an overkill system because I really value energy sovereignty. So I started with Schneider Electric. I wasn't impressed at all with their inverters and their system. So I switched to Victron. I've been really happy with the interface, the software, the quality of all of the hardware. Everything's just been pretty flawless with Victron, so I've stuck with them. On smaller systems, there's a company called Midnight Solar that is popular up here in Idaho. And there's all sorts of different companies, but all of these vary from the Tesla energy system, which requires you to be grid tied, which is just ridiculous that it's set up that way. And all of these systems that are promoted for people that live in the city, those are all grid tied systems, which are totally different from what I'm talking about because you have that safety net of the grid when your batteries are depleted and there's no sunlight. So my backup, my safety net is my 28 kilowatt Cummins generator, liquid cooled, which has absolutely changed my life. I have it inside a shed with 2 intake fans and an exhaust fan, and it is so much quieter than the air cooled generators that I've gone through over the years. I'd say actually about half as quiet as an air cooled generator, which is just unbelievable. Because where I live, there's several weeks of gloom, which I absolutely love. I almost love it more than the summer. I love the hibernation of it, the coziness of having the fire going 24/7. But I'm obviously running the generator more. My solar panels are covered in snow until the sun comes out and it slides off and melts it. So the noise of the generator is a huge deal when you're off grid, especially if you don't live near trains like me and it's just dead silent. You could hear a pin drop mostly year round, which I'm absolutely obsessed with. The noise of a generator is a big deal. So just wanted to give a shout out to the Cummins RS25. It's called Quiet Connect standby power generator. And I'll find out today when I can actually program the amps from 50 to 100 input amps, because that's been a process to upsize the wire. My previous guy did it wrong and undersized the wire, so it was heating up. Things were melting and smoking, and it was really dangerous. But I should have the full 30 kilowatts today, which is really exciting because your average generator is usually between 10 and 14 kilowatts of production. So 1 kilowatt is 1,000 watts. So it could produce 30,000 watts continuously, which is a ton of power. And with that power, I could run grow lights in my geodesic dome. If I want the avocado trees, my lemon, lime, and orange trees to just take off in the winter, I could use it to run my 2-atmosphere hard hyperbaric chamber if me or a friend gets an illness or needs to recover from something. That uses quite a bit of power, only about 4,000 watts continuously. But in the winter, that is usually going to be a generator situation to run that machine. Or I could use that power to charge a vehicle, whether it's an electric snowmobile, which I have from a brand called Taiga, which I could use for transporting wood to my greenhouse or wood to my house. Very versatile machine for getting around, going down to get my mail, the end of my driveway. I have an electric UTV. It's called the Polaris Kinetic. I could use that also for getting around my acreage. Or I could charge a full-sized electric vehicle, of which I have a lot of experience with over the last 4 years. And I want to preface this in saying, because people will think, to get mommy and daddy money. No, I started in my parents' garage. I started from nothing. I started in an RV, renting it in the ghetto of my friend's backyard in Chula Vista, San Diego, with drug deals going on next door. I started with nothing, and it's taken me 16 years of being consistent to get to this place. I used to show the kids at Juvenile Hall when I was a teacher there Earthship videos. I would talk to them about solar and sustainability and building better homes than the way that we're doing it, and try to get them excited, not from a greenwashing perspective, because I'm not into that. I don't think the whole purpose of doing all of this is global warming like they talk about. I think it's natural earth cycles, and the earth is naturally shifting. We will have more natural disasters. I don't think it's all HARP like conspiracy people talk about. I think a lot of these earthquakes and tsunamis are just a result of the earth shifting and us heading towards this inevitable pole shift at some point. And maybe ETs, or if we're in a simulation, that will just get subverted and it won't happen. Who knows? I have no idea what's going to happen, but I like being prepared for multiple different scenarios. One of the most possible, I think, is a famine and civil unrest. And that is, to me, one of the easiest ones to prepare for. So getting back to what I was talking about, I've tried a lot of different electric vehicles, as far as ones that can drive on highways and streets, not just UTVs, ATVs, snowmobiles, small ones like that, but full-size passenger vehicles. There's SUV versions, there's sedan, and there's truck versions of EVs. And being in a rural environment in the country, off-grid, having a farm, like orchard, and growing plants and chickens and animals, obviously a truck is the most common. That's the most common vehicle that I see up here. Well, maybe there's half SUV, but there's quite a bit of trucks because you need to transport food for your chickens, for your goats, for your cows, fertilizer, whatever it is. Truck beds are necessary where I live. So I've tried almost all of them on the market. And what I found is that most of them, especially the what are called legacy automakers, such as GMC, Ford, Chevy, they're only catering to people that are on grid, meaning that when I plug it in to my off-grid property, it just maxes out at 48 amp charge rate. And unless I jerry rig some system that's really complicated and it's extra work to set up a charger where you can manually reduce the amps, it just is not practical. So the only two manufacturers that I've found over the last 4 to 5 years that work with a 100% off-grid system, plug and play really easily, is Tesla, the most hated, and Rivian. Those two are the only ones where you can turn down the amperage for the charge rate, both in the app and in the vehicle, which is really convenient, especially when it's snowing out. And that was a really expensive lesson for me to learn. And this is actually the first time I've ever shared it. And maybe it only applies to 1% of you that are 100% off grid. But I think this information can literally save someone tens of thousands of dollars, because all of those brands are only catering to city dwellers, basically. And just for a second, with this charging amperage, normally an EV can charge level 2 charging. It's a full 48 amps. Level 1 would be called just a wall outlet, your standard 10 to 12 amp wall outlet, which takes 24 plus hours usually to charge an EV. Level 2 at the 48 amps is closer to the 8 to 10 hours. It's kind of an overnight thing. And then level 3 is the fast chargers, where you're absolutely obviously using the grid, the superchargers, and those are 250 kilowatt all the way up to 500 kilowatt. On a hot summer day, or even at like a day like today, it's middle of October, and it's sunny. My solar panels are not overheating because it's not 90 plus degrees out like it is in the summer. And they're actually producing more power than they do in the middle of summer, which is just wild. And there actually are solar panels called amorphous panels that I'm looking into that actually capture light from the backside, which can make a huge difference with snow reflection in the winter. So those are on my wish list long term for this property. And of course, solar panels are advancing in efficiency. They're only at, I believe, 21 to 22% efficiency, which is wild to think. Imagine if they just increased that even 5 or 10%. That would change my life for sure. But today, I can charge one of my rigs at 34 amps for several hours, which can get me quite a few miles, which I don't think a lot of people realize. If you have a paid off solar system, you're 100% off grid, you actually have full travel sovereignty. I'm not relying on a gas station to get me from A to B, which is just a whole nother level and peace of mind when you're 100% off grid instead of grid tied with solar panels. I know a lot of people are probably thinking that solar is not clean and the lithium and the batteries are slave labor, not sustainable. I get people messaging me about batteries not being able to be recycled. And a lot of this fuels the hate for not only Tesla, but just electric vehicles in general. I recommend a YouTube channel by Ben Sullins. That's spelled Sullins. He refers to EV FUD, which stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There was that Billy Bob Thornton clip, I think it was a Netflix show, where he's talking about the waste of solar panels and wind turbines and how we need gas and diesel, which there's always truth and lies mixed together with especially Netflix shows. And we absolutely do still need gas and diesel. I don't think those should be outlawed or anything ridiculous like that. It's all about use case, and why not both? I often say that in the context of human health and supplements and all of these things I talk about on the show. People get so extreme where it's one or the other. Like I said, there's not an electric skid steer yet that is practical, that works to support my lifestyle here. So I need gas, I need diesel to run different equipment. But if I can fuel up from home for free from the sun, and I'm not reliant on anyone else to do that, that to me is really priceless. And why not do it? But if you've heard a lot of these myths that EVs catch fire easier than gas cars, or that the batteries aren't recyclable, which is just simply not true, or whatever of the hundreds of myths that are out there about EVs, Ben Sullins' channel is awesome. He is a global warming guy, so I would just ignore that. I think all that's BS. But all of his other info around EVs is the best that I've found. I do want to make a side note here that I don't think solar is the solution forever. Of course, there's nuclear power, there's mini nuclear reactors, there's a lot of suppression of new technology. I mean, you just think of how much money these people are making that are selling us gas and diesel. If I own those industries, I would definitely off people that are a challenge to it to secure my income. And I'm sure that's been happening with people that designed cars that run on ocean water, or if free energy exists, kind of like the things that Stephen Greer talks about, a little box that could run your house or your car just indefinitely forever from the quantum vacuum field that's all around us. I'm not saying with this episode that solar is the end all be all by any means, or electric vehicles are the ultimate form of transportation. It's just the best that we have right now. And I don't know about you, but I can't find someone that could build me a free energy device. I know there's conferences near me where supposedly they showcase those devices. My friend Victor Sagalovsky went to that a couple years ago. I would love to have one, but I think you have to know somebody or maybe Grok at some point, or these AI systems will, as Elon says, invent new physics, or maybe just uncover it for the lemmings like us that are at the bottom of the social hierarchy, so that we could actually fully have energy sovereignty. That's what I'm most excited about with the future, is getting beyond being reliant on the sun for power, and something that could actually just tap into the infinite amount of energy around us, kind of like Nassim Haramein talks about. But I think people get stuck there and they don't appreciate what we have now and what we have available now, which is all we can do. So why not use solar and batteries and EVs if you have enough solar to charge your EV to support your driving needs? I think most people, and Ben Solins talks about this, overestimate their range requirements. If you start tracking how many miles you drive in a day, unless you're a delivery driver, cannabis, Amazon, you're driving, delivering flowers to people or something, you're probably not racking up that many miles. And the way that I drive living remote is I usually only grocery shop once a week maximum. And so I could spend the next few days charging from the sun if I need to. The other common complaint, besides the lower range, granted, I have a gas vehicle that has less range than my EV. So I have what's called an Ineos Grenadier Quartermaster. They make a SUV and a truck version. And it's pretty much the most analog, old school, but modern vehicle that you can buy today, with a lot of manual switches and easy to access fuse box under the back seat. It's like the ultimate prepper vehicle as far as a gasoline rig. And that has less range than my EVs. On the full tank, it's only 300 miles. So I think a lot of people just don't look into this deeply enough, and they don't really know what they're talking about. But there's so many myths and misconceptions to go through. So I'm not going to cover all of them in this show, but I just wanted to bring up a few of the common ones. And now let's get to the main meat of this show, which is the E.M.Fs, the electromagnetic waves, the electromagnetic field that is produced when those inductive motors, or in the case of Tesla, permanent magnet motors, when those are spinning really fast to power the wheels, they do produce an electric and a magnetic field. But there's a difference in field strength between the induction motors and the permanent magnet motors. So the details matter, and all the people that are fear-mongering about E.M.Fs and EVs, they really have no clue what they're talking about because they're not getting into any of the details. So an EV that has an induction motor in the front and a permanent magnet in the rear, that changes things. So the people in the front seat get a different exposure than the people in the back seat. But what it really comes down to, like I talked about earlier, is the distance. So how far from the spinning motors is safe? It's about 1 to 2 feet. And depending on how strict you are about the readings, 1 to 2 feet is pretty close to background levels. And last I checked, people aren't hanging out the window with their head near the wheel while they're driving on the freeway. So you're barely getting exposed at all in the driver's seat of an electric vehicle. While the battery is discharging, and I think this is a common argument that people make anti-EV, yes, the battery creates a magnetic field while it's discharging. And I actually had a friend named Alphonse that works for a fast charging company visit from Florida. And he was actually testing when I had my Rivian truck. It was the tri-motor, newer Gen 2 Rivian truck that I tried for a little bit. We were driving to a restaurant and he held the E.M.F meter down at our feet. I held it at my feet. He held it down at his feet. And most of the exposure from the magnetic field from that discharging battery and maybe a little bit of the spinning motors was only the legs. Once you got to the torso, it was dropped off significantly. So that's something that people don't realize too, is most of the exposure in an EV is from the waist down, but specifically the knees down. And there is a solution to this. I actually have a friend that's developing custom kind of Faraday style mats to put in your EV for different makes and models so that it actually blocks the magnetic field coming up, which is a little trickier to manage than an electric field. You either need thick steel or something called mu metal. But to me, that's just extra. To be safe in an EV, you don't need to wrap yourself in aluminum foil or wear an E.M.F shielding, silver embedded baseball cap or jacket. All of that's fine. And you could add that on if you want. But my point of this whole show, and whether you buy my products or not, I really don't care, is emphasizing antioxidant supplements, because antioxidant supplements have been heavily demonized over the years because people say you can take too much and we need a certain level of oxidative stress and free radicals for cell signaling and all of these reasons, which is true. But when you add up all of the exposures that we have, not only E.M.Fs, but chronic heavy metal toxicity, lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, that's constantly taxing our water soluble vitamins or fat soluble vitamins, our mineral status. You add on psychological stress, you add on exposures like glyphosate, air pollution, water pollution. It just goes on forever. It's really hard to OD on antioxidants, especially if you're just taking the regular serving size or maybe 2 or 3x that every day, even. You are not going to overdose on antioxidant supplements. It's really interesting to me observing this rise of whole food supplements only and herbs and this demonization of isolated, quote unquote, synthetic lab made supplements, such as ascorbic acid form of vitamin C or mixed tocopherol form of vitamin E, isolated zinc bound to the amino acid L-carnosine, which is really anti-glycation and anti-aging and heals the gut lining. Not making claims with my product, but that's just what the literature shows, especially with zinc bound to L-carnosine. Copper orotate, melatonin. I mean, you keep adding in these supplements that are isolates, and they all work together in different ways to protect you from various forms of E.M.F, whether it's RF, ELF, E.M.F, stands for extreme low frequency E.M.F, from, say, Bluetooth sources or magnetic fields or electric fields. There's this relationship between your endogenous antioxidant system, like glutathione, superoxide dismutase, catalase, and your requirements for these essential vitamins, whether from food or supplements or both. Vitamin C and vitamin E work together intimately. I've said it a bunch on the show. When vitamin E donates an electron, it becomes tocopheroxyl radical, and that can actually get regenerated or revived with vitamin C. Vitamin C also recycles glutathione, that trendy supplement that everybody takes in liposomal form or they inject it. A lot of people are just vitamin C deficient chronically, and this isn't a nutrient that you pee out. Vitamin C is stored in the body as ascorbate. That is not very well known about vitamin C. So whether you live in an apartment complex, whether you drive an electric vehicle or a hybrid or both, even modern vehicles, you're getting exposure way higher than we would have 3-4 decades ago. And that's completely fine because we have the technology called nutritional supplementation, specifically isolated supplements. Whenever somebody asks me for advice, what EMF blocking or mitigating device do you recommend? Some BS quantum necklace or a little scalar emitter that's just a blinking LED light, which is one of the devices that I shot with my shotgun and opened it up. And it's just ridiculous the claims that these companies make for these devices that range between $1,000 up to $5,000 and more, even. One called the Chi Shield that's just ridiculous how much they charge for that device that does nothing. And they say there's studies, but they don't really have anything backing them up. They're just making these claims and convincing people that their EMF blocking devices work. You really want to focus on antioxidants. You want to focus on vitamin C, vitamin E, melatonin, zinc, copper, magnesium, and shilajit. Those would be the big seven. Of course, there's selenium that shows up on PubMed in the clinical literature as it relates to EMF exposure and electromagnetic hypersensitivity, or EHS, as it's called. You can keep going with the nutrients. There's even literature showing iodine is helpful. But those seven that I mentioned, especially high dose melatonin, are really powerful. If I just had to pick three, it would be vitamin E, melatonin, and magnesium. If you just wanted to take only three. But of course, the more you add, the more protected you will be from these various sources of EMF. So now I'd like to dive deeper into EMF, define it. Here's a great study I'll put in the show notes entitled Melatonin, a Potential Shield Against Electromagnetic Waves. And I'm going to read this paragraph under the third section entitled Electromagnetic Field, the Basics. The advent of electromagnetic waves technology has many benefits in our daily lives. While it has many advantages, it is undoubtedly a major invisible pollutant of our natural environment. As Dr. Robert O. Becker said, the greatest polluting element in the Earth's environment is the proliferation of electromagnetic fields. The EMF spectrum can be divided into three groups: static field at 0 Hz, extreme low frequency field, or ELF, from 3 Hz all the way up to 3000 Hz, and radio frequency fields from 3000 Hz to 300 gigahertz. According to the World Health Organization, electric fields are generated from electric charges or voltage differences, while magnetic fields are created around moving electric charges and magnets. Both fields are vector quantities with a direction and magnitude. An electric field does not require a flowing current to be generated, which makes a plugged-in appliance an emitter of an electric field even when it's turned off. Electric devices are the main causes of low-frequency electric and magnetic fields in our environment. Other sources include TV and radio stations that emit high-frequency RF waves. It is worth noting that most human sources of electromagnetic waves have a low-frequency, long wavelength characteristic, which leads to non-ionizing radiation with less energy to break molecular bonds. Although magnetic fields induce currents in the human body, ELF EMF and RF EMF do not typically impose adverse health effects but can result in many biological effects. Chief among them is the generation of free radicals and oxidative stress, a common denominator of many diseases. Static, ELF, and RF cause alterations in free radicals and oxidative stress molecules, leading to biological changes such as DNA damage, increased immune response, and disruption of neural transmission. I'm going to read one more section here because I think it lays it out really well. EMF results in thermal and non-thermal physiological changes in the body. Thermal effects are characterized by an increase in the temperature of the organ affected by radiation, while the non-thermal effects involve the generation of ROS, reactive oxygen species. These are free radicals that can steal electrons from lipids in the cell membranes through a process called lipid peroxidation, resulting in additional free and fatty acid radicals and disruption of cellular function, especially in the mitochondria where membrane damage further reinforces lipid peroxidation. Under normal conditions, ROSs are constantly synthesized but contained by antioxidants that terminate lipid peroxidation. The body's antioxidant system is comprised of glutathione peroxidase, catalase, and superoxide dismutase, heme oxygenase, and most importantly, melatonin. Under certain conditions of ELF and RF E.M.F exposure, this body's oxidative antioxidant balance is disrupted, as corroborated by many preclinical and clinical studies. So when you're driving, either in the driver's seat of a Tesla or Rivian or any other EV, you're obviously not getting heated up. You're getting more heat from the infrared coming through the car and the windows than you are from the battery and the motors powering the wheels. But as it described in the study, the non-thermal effects increase the production of reaction oxygen species or atoms with unpaired electrons. And that process is facilitated through lipid peroxidation that occurs in our cell membranes, the mitochondrial membranes. And we have this endogenous antioxidant system to protect us. And while superoxide, dismutase, glutathione peroxidase, and catalase usually get all of the credit, and people love supplementing glutathione, as I mentioned earlier, the vitamin C connection to glutathione, the vitamin E connection, the melatonin connection to glutathione, we often forget how powerful melatonin is. Most people, even in the health space that I've spoken to, think of melatonin as just a sleep hormone. And thanks to the podcast that I'm having, the guests that I've had on in the last year, that's slowly turning around and people are starting to realize, wow, melatonin is not just for sleep. It's not only synthesized in the pineal gland, lots synthesized in our mitochondria, and it's actually antiviral directly. It's anti-tumor. It enhances mitochondrial function. It's one of the most powerful antioxidants in the body. And supplementing it does not cause all the harm that we've been taught by Jack Kruse and quantum people and all of the myths that have put out there about melatonin supplements decreasing your endogenous production, which is just false, demonstrably false. In fact, I've posted studies where it's the exact opposite, that supplementing exogenous melatonin actually increases your endogenous production. I personally take 200 milligrams, sometimes more, of my MitoLife high dose melatonin every single night. When I'm traveling, I usually 3 or 4x that, get all the way up to 1 gram every night. And a big reason why I do that is E.M.F exposure. I'm way more concerned about sleeping with the Wi-Fi on, especially in an Airbnb, than I am in driving in a Tesla or a Rivian or any other electric car. It's really about the exposure time. If you charge your Tesla and you sleep where the charge port is at the back left of the car, the back left seat, then obviously you're going to be exposed to a huge magnetic field. Or in the case of Rivian, it's at the front, which is not ideal if you're sitting in a Rivian charging it. That to me was not a good design by the manufacturer, just for the health aspects of fast charging. But going back to the lipid peroxidation thing, that is one of the easiest things to handle. Not necessarily if someone's megadosing fish oil or they're listening to influencers like Rhonda Patrick, where every other video she's promoting either creatine or omega-3s, because fish oil can actually increase your lipid peroxidation, especially under the influence of an electromagnetic field or chronic E.M.F exposure. However, if you're supplementing the right things, instead of fish oil or krill oil, you're taking vitamin E, which is really the way to do it. Or if you're taking cod liver oil, you're taking vitamin E to match it, which is what I do in the wintertime. Or even if you're eating a lot of seafood, because there's obviously natural docosahexaenoic acid, DHA, and omega-3 in there, and also omega-6, the whole complex of the fatty acids that are found in whole fish. It's a great food. You also have selenium, iodine, minerals, but the vitamin E in the fish that you eat is heat sensitive. It doesn't destroy all of it, but you get way more vitamin E from raw fish, sushi, which obviously comes with its own problems of potential parasitic infection. One reason why I smoke generally a cigar a day. Tobacco is one of the oldest time-tested antiparasitics on the planet. Mixed tocopherol vitamin E is my favorite prevention for lipid peroxidation. Once it starts, vitamin E stops it in its tracks and stops the chain reaction and the creation of byproducts like the aldehydes from being created. One of the most destructive ones is called malondialdehyde, or MDA for short. If that's high in a test, that is indicative of oxidative damage caused by lipid peroxidation. It's really interesting that there's been this huge marketing campaign to promote tocotrienols. If you go down the vitamin E rabbit hole, you'll pretty much only find Ray Peat, that's the big voice that was defending the tocopherols, but all the health podcasts were shilling tocotrienols, which are not as effective for lipid peroxidation. The product that I sell under my brand MitoLife is a mix of mostly alpha tocopherol. The second most abundant in that supplement is gamma tocopherol, and then a little bit of delta and beta. And they actually all work together in synergy to stabilize the cell membranes and neutralize free radicals. Going back to melatonin for a second, in the same study that I referenced a few minutes ago, it reads, in a study on 2,450 megahertz RF E.M.F irradiated rats, melatonin was shown to reduce lipid peroxide and MDA, nitric oxide levels in the erythrocytes and heart tissues, respectively. I didn't mention nitric oxide also rises in the presence of E.M.Fs, and that contributes to the formation of a super free radical called peroxynitrite. It's not a reactive oxygen species, it's called a reactive nitrogen species, which is worse. I'm going to expand on this because it's an important aspect of how E.M.Fs cause harm through this creation of peroxynitrite. So we've all heard of nitric oxide, and there's different forms of nitric oxide. A lot of bodybuilders are familiar with L-arginine amino acid or L-citrulline because they take these before a workout to increase the pump or before a bodybuilding photo shoot. But what a lot of people don't know is that for that enzyme eNOS to work, which is endothelial nitric oxide synthase, it requires a cofactor that's called tetrahydrobiopterin, or BH4. So where this bad guy peroxynitrite comes in, that's really reactive, and it attacks DNA and cell membranes and tissues. It's a combination of superoxide and inducible nitric oxide that's increased in the presence of E.M.Fs. That eNOS enzyme, the endothelial nitric oxide synthase, gets uncoupled by peroxynitrite, and it converts it from, instead of making nitric oxide, it actually makes superoxide, which damages your cells, your mitochondria, your DNA, your tissues, and is linked to heart disease and inflammation. So what ascorbic acid does, or vitamin C, is once the BH4 is damaged, it actually recycles it back to its usable form, which allows that eNOS enzyme to work properly. And what's really interesting is that ascorbic acid works better than glutathione in this regard. Glutathione doesn't recycle BH4 as well as ascorbic acid does. So it's funny that liposomal glutathione is called the master antioxidant and the super antioxidant. I would more rather take vitamin C as ascorbic acid, vitamin E as mixed tocopherol, and high dose melatonin. And if you want to rub glutathione in your skin. I had a show about that. That's on my website that I promote that product, Glutaril. It's great. It's just expensive, and I think it's an extra tool in your kit. If you just want to go above and beyond and do everything all at once, then you can add in a glutathione supplement that's transdermal, but it's not necessary and it's more money. So it's really what you focus on with your money. Most people overspend and they're taking the wrong things. One really powerful supplement that a lot of people probably don't know that I sell under my brand MitoLife is a brain focus supplement. It's called encephalon. It's a combination of a microalgae extract from a species called Phyodactylum tricornidum, and it's a trademarked ingredient that contains fucoxanthin, which is shown in a lot of studies to help with all sorts of stuff. It's antifungal, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, supports the liver, reducing fat accumulation in the liver, helps with weight loss. It's a great antioxidant. And that's just one of the components. So encephalon is kind of a whole food supplement. It's a whole food extract of that algae. So you also have sterols, amino acids, vitamins, minerals. Of course, it's very, very small trace amounts, but they're still in there. So that's the difference between taking just a fucoxanthin extract and this whole algae extract that I have in that product. But there's also ginkgo biloba extract and phosphatidylserine. All three of the ingredients in that product have been shown clinically to reduce lipid peroxidation. What's really fascinating, and part of why I made it that way, is the phosphatidylserine combination with alpha tocopherol in my PUFA Protect product. They work together synergistically to reduce lipid peroxidation even more. So I'm not just coming out with products randomly. These are all part of a combination stack, you can call it, that supports what's called the CLF protocol, or calcification, lipofuscin, and fibrosis, that I created about 6 years ago. So lowering lipid peroxidation is a huge part of improving human health, not only neurologically in the brain, but in the nervous system, throughout the whole body. The whole body functions better when there's a lower level of lipid peroxidation. The reason for that is not only the inflammatory side of it, eating up your B vitamins, your minerals, but also inhibiting transport of nutrients in and out of the cell and the mitochondria. Another all-star combination for E.M.F protection is copper and zinc. Those two minerals are really fascinating to me. If you followed my work for years, you know that I've supplemented them individually in isolation, starting with copper, never going super high dose, but taking more copper than most people take, and then only taking zinc by itself for a few years. And now I've come to this balanced place of taking both zinc and copper together every day. So I have a zinc plus product that's a combination of zinc carnosine and copper orotate in a very specific ratio that's based on research. So 16 milligrams zinc elemental to 2 milligrams of elemental copper. That's what's called an 8-to-1 ratio, which is ideal for most people and the environmental conditions that we're in. While there's more research and PubMed studies on zinc supplementation for electromagnetic field exposure, I also think copper is important as well because of its requirement in creating the copper zinc superoxide dismutase antioxidant. You need both minerals to make it. And there's different forms of it. There's SOD1, SOD3. There's even manganese SOD, which is called SOD2. And manganese deficiency in humans can be a big problem because that manganese SOD is in the mitochondria of all human cells. But there's also copper only SOD, which is really fascinating. So copper is a crucial mineral Some people say it's all toxic and never supplement it. And some people say only supplement it, never supplement zinc. I'm more into balance over the years of trying extremes. So I recommend supplementing both. Like many of the hair tissue mineral analysis practitioners, it's just in what ratio do you take them? And even in a situation of copper toxicity, you still want to take copper. You just want to take a lot more zinc, like maybe an 8-to-1 ratio, like the zinc plus MitoLife product. I take that with breakfast. If I eat lunch, which I normally don't, I take it with lunch and then I take it with dinner. So I'm at least getting 4 milligrams a day of elemental copper, sometimes 6, and at least 32 milligrams of elemental zinc every day. And for someone that didn't eat much, if any at all, red meat for the first 3 decades of my life, I know that I created a very severe zinc deficiency, let alone the heavy metal toxicity that depletes zinc in everybody because zinc is antagonized or competes for binding sites with certain metals, cadmium, zinc, arsenic, and even some radioactive isotopes like uranium. Zinc supplementation prevents uranium toxicity. So there's all these relationships. That's one of the most interesting aspects of human health to me. It's why I own a supplement company, is learning about these relationships and creating products that help create balance in most people. Of course, every MitoLife supplement is not going to be for everybody, but my goal is to at least make it beneficial for most people. What's interesting, if you search zinc and E.M.F protection on PubMed, for example, you'll see tons of studies on how zinc helps protect from lipid peroxidation in the brain, how it protects the liver and lung in rats exposed to 50 hertz magnetic field, how zinc actually lowers MDA levels in the liver, that product of lipid peroxidation, how it reduces apoptosis caused by electromagnetic radiation or electromagnetic fields. This study was specifically on 2.45 gigahertz. There was one really interesting study looking at the erythrocytes, a type of red blood cell in rats exposed to electromagnetic fields, and found that they had lower zinc levels in those red blood cells, which is really interesting and goes with my message here that there's a burn rate of nutrients that I often talk about on this podcast. And a big contributor to the burn rate is not only heavy metals, but it's E.M.Fs. And again, it's more about sleeping in Wi-Fi fields and chronic exposure to high strength fields. Driving in an electric car once a day for a few hours is not going to cause that big of an effect. However, if you're taking these supplements regularly, you will be immune to not only electric vehicles, but also Wi-Fi exposure. And that's been my experience. Every time I travel down to Southern California to visit my family for birthdays and holidays, I always feel like my body is preventing something from getting in. I'm very tuned in, and I could feel when my immune system has very slight alteration. And every time I visit, I always feel that. And the MitoLife supplements, I always take methylene blue every time I travel, fairly high dose. And it's absolutely changed my sleep when I travel. Instead of feeling wired but tired and laying there in the Airbnb bed and just feeling like I'm getting radiated, supplementing all the MitoLife products, the zinc, copper, melatonin, shilajit, magnesium, vitamin C, and vitamin E, I feel fully protected. And not just at a psychological level, I could actually feel it in my body. I don't get sick. I don't get infections anymore with the current stack that I have. And it feels incredible. I don't have to worry about traveling anymore and getting out of my, perfect paradise bubble up here in northern Idaho in the forest. And that brings me to my next point. The anti-supplement people, the anti-synthetic supplement people, the whole food only supplement people, they all are not into adapting. So in the future, I am 100% positive, I would bet this cabin on it, in fact, that your only option as a taxi service will be to go in an electric vehicle. So are you never going to use a taxi, whether it's the robo taxi from Elon Musk or whatever it is, just because you'll get radiated? Or are you going to adapt to changing conditions, take the right supplements, and not worry about it? I would rather be in the latter category. All of the people that make posts anti-EMF and anti-synthetic supplements, they usually live in the most synthetic environment. They have no clue what it means to live 100% off grid like I do. They have no clue about sustainability and how to do it, how much work it takes, how to make it easier. I know all of this stuff. And of course, I'm still learning. I stay humble. I don't sound like it with that statement, but I'm just making a point that these people talk a lot of talk and they have no idea what they're talking about, because living in the mountains, 100% off grid, far from places, self-driving is amazing. Being able to charge at home is amazing. It totally changes the experience and your level of power, basically, to be able to do what you want to do. Then I want to give an honorable mention to Shilajit. I often say if there's only one supplement that you take, which there's not only one supplement, but maybe the most important one is Shilajit from Russia. It's from high altitude mountains in Russia called the Altai Mountains, and they're compressed into tablets. You might be familiar with Shilajit, that you have to scoop out of a little jar, and it's really messy and annoying and it tastes bad. I sell a tablet form. It's that same quality of resin, and in fact better than a lot of these companies, because a lot of these companies have weird 0.333 parts per million of gold, like they try to standardize it, which is just hilarious because as a whole food supplement you can't standardize it. So they're spiking it with gold, which is toxic in high amounts or chronic amounts like that. So what I do with my Shilajit supplement, since I've been taking it since about 2010, is I do a third-party lab analysis. And on the page, mitolife.co, go to Panacea, click on lab report, and you could see not only the heavy metals, but actually the iron, iodine, copper, zinc, magnesium, potassium, sodium content, which is really interesting. I don't know of many other companies that are doing that. So I third-party lab test every batch that I import from Russia, which is very expensive to do with the politics that are going on now. All that to say that the minerals in there, it's a whole food supplement with pretty much the whole periodic table. And what makes it really special is it also has fulvic and humic acid, which helps to bind the really, really small amounts of metals that are in there, which even if you eat organic produce, newsflash, you're still getting heavy metals. There's no way to get zero heavy metals. We're just constantly ingesting them in everything, in the air, in our food, hopefully not your water. But that's why it's so important to take the right supplements consistently, specifically magnesium, zinc, copper, because it helps to counteract these metals that are always coming in. And Shilajit is the best for that because, as I mentioned, the fulvic acid is a powerful heavy metal chelator, and it also increases nutrient absorption. So the minerals that are in Shilajit go right into the cell. All those little salt electrolyte packets that you see propping up now, this is way better than those. And talk about bioavailability, they go right in. So my personal stack, because a lot of people always ask me, 5 tablets of that every morning after breakfast. After my coffee, I take 1 gram. Each one of those is 200 milligrams. So I take 5 of them every morning. I take vitamin E or vitamin K2 separately because there's a slight competition between the fat soluble vitamins that people don't understand. That's why multivitamins and generally multi-mineral supplements are not the way to go, because there's a lot of competition and people don't know about the ratios and what ratio is right for you. So I take vitamin E and vitamin K2 separately. with either lunch or dinner. I'll take 1 zinc copper after breakfast because that on an empty stomach will cause nausea. I neglected to mention before I eat breakfast, while I'm preparing breakfast for my 2 cats, I take 3 dissolvidol capsules, that's systemic enzymes, which help reduce scar tissue in the body. And they have a lot of interesting effects on viruses that's come out the last 4 years. I take 6 beef liver capsules, either with breakfast or dinner or both if I'm feeling it. I take 4 capsules of my elk velvet with breakfast, 1 jellyfish jolt, 1 to 4 lithium. The NAD power, I take 1 of those. That's niacinamide. And then usually in the middle of the day, I'll take my vitamin C. And then at night, I'll pretty much take the same stuff, but I'll also take 4 encephalon and 4 of my 50 milligram melatonin product. I'll take 1 capsule of my probiotic a day. Usually I'll take the magnesium at night, 3 capsules, and a digestive enzyme with every meal, just 1 with every meal. And that's basically what I do. And then whatever other supplement that I'm experimenting with, I'm really excited about a GABA related one that I'm working on formulating for you guys that I'm really feeling. So I don't want to give the teaser too soon, but that will be early next year at the soonest when that supplement is released. But that's my spiel on EMFs and electric vehicles. That's my thoughts on it. I know most people in the health space probably disagree, although maybe it's 50-50. I see the messages on Instagram and the posts that people make. And my reading of the situation is that it's about 50-50. And a lot of really prominent people in the health space just keep it a secret that they have an electric vehicle because they don't want to deal with the hate, which I completely understand. So my website is matt-blackburn.com. You could see all of my recommended products on there. If you click view all on the front page or click shop at the top, my CLF protocols I mentioned is up there as well. I manage this page myself, so I add products and remove products. Usually don't remove, very rarely, but it's been a while since I've added a product here, so I'd like to give it some love soon. So follow my Instagram, Matt Blackburn, or my Facebook if you want to keep abreast of updates to that website. And then my brand is mitolife.co. I sell grounding sheets. The grounding rods were just upgraded to copper. I didn't even talk about that in this show. Grounding rod to earth while you sleep, especially, is really underrated for health. Some people worry about it picking up fields from your environment. My experience, if it's rod to earth, even if it's the outlet connection, the third prong and the electrical outlet, depending on the home, it could still have a benefit. It's one of those things you just have to experiment with. But if you can, it's a really long cord, put it out the second story window and out your screen, out your window, the grounding rod, really incredible for improving sleep, really underrated for sleep quality. Have a really good shampoo and conditioner that is currently on sale. That's really clean, no synthetic ingredients in them. A really good shower filter that is pure KDF. And what's really cool is you can actually replace the filtration cartridges, unlike a lot of filters that you have to throw away the whole thing. And the replacement filters are currently out of stock, but if you buy the whole filter, obviously it comes with one. I travel with it. It's made in Italy as far as the housing. And it's just a lot of volume of KDF, and it actually softens the water somewhat as well. So that's a really great shower filter that I make with my friend Austin. And then under the wellness tab, you can see all of those products that I recommended. I always get complimented too for how affordable they are, especially when I run sales, which is often, Black Friday, Christmas is coming up. That is the best time to stock up and buy maybe 6 months or a year's worth even of my products. But that's a wrap for today. Hope I changed your mind on some things if you were on the fence and brought some balance to the conversation and less fear to this whole topic of electric vehicles and EMFs. And like I said, all of the political stuff, Ben Solin's channel, obviously he's not the only one, but it's consolidated there in his videos where he just tears down all of those myths about electric vehicles. So that is all. I will see you guys next Friday. Stay supercharged.